In this video, I will be giving my honest opinions about the Fujifilm X100V. I'll be going over which accessories I have, why I bought this camera in the first place, as well as what I feel are the positives and negatives about this camera. So to start with accessories, they're fairly similar to the X100S. I still have the same Tiffen black Pro Mist filter. I use this on the majority of my photos, as many of you already know. I did end up getting a new UV filter. I went with a Tiffen filter rather than the B&W one. Had nothing to do with performance. It was simply because the brass was showing on the B&W filter and I wasn't really a fan of it. You know, as you can see, this looks a lot better than that all chipped up previously. I still have the same soft shutter button. Hopefully this one can stay with me forever. And then it's still the same rope camera strap. And then I also have a screen protector on the back. Those are pretty much all the, oh, actually I do have a thumb grip. I decided to get one of these, just slides into the hot shoe. Looks like this, it's all metal. This one's fine. I know that there are more expensive ones that can bend back so that you can actually access the ISO and shutter dial a little bit better, but this one's not too bad. I do know that that one makes it a little bit easier to be able to access that dial, but it's not something that, you know, is really worth the money in my opinion. All right, so let's talk about why I bought this camera in the first place. So many of you know I had the Fujifilm X100S and that camera is great. I have no issues with that camera, none really whatsoever. But I did want to upgrade, and that's because there are some features that the X100S does not have that this camera does have. Some of those features include several new film simulations, as well as different capabilities in camera. So for my job, I work on a computer the majority of the day. So the last thing that I'm wanting to do is sit on a computer and edit photos. I really don't enjoy editing photos. I know I did an entire video over how I edit, but I really don't care to edit photos at all. I would rather just be out doing whatever I want to do and enjoy my day. And then if I want to take a photo, I take a photo and then it's just done. I don't want to have to deal with anything. So that's why I started using film. And film's a lot of fun, but film is definitely expensive. And when you're using film, you of course run the risk of shooting a blank roll, something happening with processing. Depending on, you know, you have to put a little bit more thought process into it unless you're using a point and shoot. And I wanted my photos to be a little bit better than just with a point and shoot camera. So I thought about this for a while. I considered film cameras, I considered just doing film, but after the expense and all of those different things, and yeah, I know I could develop and everything at home, scan at home, but that's, you know, another just time thing. This is all about saving myself time, because that's something that you're not going to be able to get back is time. And I think that this makes your time the most efficient, because the things that you can achieve in camera are pretty amazing with this. And that's why I bought it, because there's so many different options to adjust things in camera that you weren't able to do on older models in the X100 series. Some of the different things include like clarity, the ability to change the color blue. You can make it like a little bit darker, or you can keep it lighter. There are little things like that you're able to do in camera that you weren't able to do on older models, as well as in like different things like adding grain. Like you can do all of these different things in camera. You couldn't do that with the X100S, and that's why I wanted to go with this, because I wanted to do all my photos in camera. I didn't want to have to edit, and I think that this camera achieves that pretty well, and it creates photos that I enjoy. Yeah, it's great. I love this camera, and here are some of those image examples so that you guys can take a look at those. These are all straight out of camera, so enjoy. So again, I didn't really explain why exactly I bought the Fujifilm X100V. Yes, it's because of the in-camera capabilities, but there are several other Fujifilm models that are able to achieve this. So why the X100V specifically? Well, the obvious and biggest difference is size. This camera is tiny. It is small enough to fit in a jacket pocket, and you can bring it with you literally everywhere. I bring my camera with me every single day. Every time I leave, I just put it across my body and it just sits down here, like right there. And I bring this with me literally everywhere. And I've never had any issues going into, a sporting event or going into, for example, I actually was just in Chinatown with one of my friends and he was shooting with his RZ67 and we got kicked out, but we didn't get kicked out. He got kicked out because he had his big camera and they require that you have a permit. But me walking around with my X100V, they didn't say anything to me. They don't care. And that's a huge reason as to why I got this. Back when I was shooting all my photos with a Canon 80D, at one point they didn't want to let me into a few different events because the lenses were removable and things like that. So that's just another huge reason why I like to have pretty much one of the best cameras that you can get at such a compact size where you're never going to have any issues like that. The second reason that I bought this camera was because of the focal length. I love the 35mm focal length, and I know that a lot of people are like, well, I want to be able to change lenses. And you sort of can if you get the WCL or TCL converter adapter lenses. But if you're wanting to get different focal lengths, then I'm just going to say that this camera is probably not for you. For me, at least, I have several different focal lengths for my Canon AE1 or my Canon 80D. And to me, I just feel like it just creates unnecessary bulk. Thanks, dog. I really appreciate him scratching himself in the background. But it just creates unnecessary bulk. I don't want to carry around a backpack with extra lenses. I just want my one camera, maybe a few extra filters in a small pouch or something, and then be good to go. Basically, what I'm trying to say is the 35mm focal length, using one single lens, it can make you more creative. It can make you move around more, look at scenes a very specific way, because if you're limiting yourself, it forces you to do different things that you might normally not do. If you're just standing somewhere with a zoom lens, you might just, zoom in rather than walking over to it. Because if you walk closer to a subject that you're trying to shoot or a scene that you're trying to shoot or trying to get a different angle or something like that, you might find something a lot more interesting than just, seeing it, zooming in or whatever. And that's not to say that if you have a zoom lens, you can't do those types of things. But for me, it made me a little bit more creative, get a little bit more out of my comfort zone, start to move around a little bit more, try to take different angles at different times, and just really make my photography better. So besides the size and the focal length, there are, several upgrades to this camera, including the upgraded lens, the new tilting screen, the touchscreen ability. There's so many different things that I could get into. I'm not going to get into all the different specs of different things because there are tons and tons of videos or any blogs or whatever you want to read on that. But there are so many different improvements to this camera over the X100S, which is why I felt comfortable buying it, because I was very, very comfortable with the X100S already. And after testing, trying out the X100V a little bit and figuring out what I was able to achieve, I knew that that was the camera that I wanted to buy. And one of the other upgrades was 4K video, and that's something that I like to take. I love taking video. I originally bought my 80D because it was for photo and video, but then, don't really like shooting with the 80D anymore, but I still like shooting video. So the 4K in camera with the X100V is great. No, it doesn't have image stabilization, but I wouldn't expect a camera like this to have that. But, it still shoots great 4K video. So you put it on a tripod, you put it on a stabilizer, neither of which I'm going to use. I'm just going to do handheld, but I end up probably downscaling the 4K to 1080p anyways. So then if you just use a stabilizer in Premiere or something, you can get rid of that shakiness and not even have to deal with it at all. So there's so many different workarounds. I know that a lot of people have complained about not having image stabilization for the 4K video. I mean, you can't have it all. There's no perfect camera out there. So now I'm gonna get into some of the negatives that I feel about this camera. I feel like I already went over a lot of the different positives. I'm able to achieve what I want straight out of camera, all the different upgrades for this camera, and now I'm gonna tell you about some of the negatives. So the number one thing by far is price. This thing is expensive as and I don't really feel comfortable sometimes even bringing it around with me because it's so expensive. I'm going to say it again, but coming from the Fujifilm X100S to the X100V is a huge price difference. I bought my X100S used for about $400, and then you add $1,000 onto that, and that's what the X100V is. So just that price tag alone, bringing something around with you that is that expensive, kind of gives you a little bit more nerves, in my opinion. I'm definitely getting more used to it, but bringing around a piece of equipment that's that more expensive makes you feel like you have to be a little bit too careful with it at times. I feel like sometimes, as you saw from my B&W UV filter, it got bumped into a lot of things. With this, I feel like I'm extra careful with it because it's so expensive. And that's not to say that the build quality or anything is lacking. It's great. Like, the build is fantastic. I mean, I haven't really gotten into this thing a whole ton, but it is a beautiful camera. I love the way that it looks. The sharper edges, like on the front here compared to the X100S, it's gorgeous, and it's built very, very well. I know that if I knock this thing into a lot of stuff, like, it's gonna be fine, but it just makes me that much more nervous with that price tag attached to it. So that is, I think, the number one thing that is a negative about this camera. The second thing that I feel is a negative about this camera that I haven't seen a whole lot of people talk about actually is the electronic viewfinder. Basically, for those of you that know what chromatic aberration is, that happens quite a bit when you're looking through the EVF. It doesn't actually show up on the final image, but if you're looking through the EVF and let's say that you're looking at power lines or the side of a tree branch or something like that, you'll get some of that chromatic aberration, the green or the pink or whatever other color. You'll get that through the EVF. And when I first started using the camera, I'm like, what the heck is this? Like, why is this showing up through the EVF? Like, this shouldn't even be there. And I can't find anything online. So if anybody has any suggestions, or if you've noticed this as well, I guess I didn't notice it with my X100S, but I've definitely noticed it with the X100V. Could be because there's more pixels. I have no idea. But it doesn't show up on the final image. It's just through the EVF. I find that to be a little bit distracting. But yeah, it was just something that I wanted to bring up. I think that that's a negative. I would rather it, kind of look one-to-one with the actual LCD screen, but it's not. And that goes for the Q menu as well. If you launch the Q menu, and you can set that so that it's see-through and you can see your image behind it, which I highly recommend you do in the menu system. But if you launch that menu while you're looking through the EVF, you can see very dramatically that chromatic aberration around each of those boxes. Again, I'm not sure. Maybe there's something in the settings that I'm able to adjust. If you have any suggestions, go ahead and leave a comment. But that was something that I thought was fairly distracting and something that I would not expect to be there. So the Fujifilm app is the next negative. Coming to the X100V, I never previously had the ability to remote transfer my images, so I didn't know really anything about doing that. But there's a reason that the Fujifilm app has 1.5 stars on the App Store, because it doesn't work that well. I can get it to work, but it might take me 15 to 20 minutes of turning the camera on and off, setting the Bluetooth on and off of my phone, trying to connect, doesn't connect. Sometimes it'll do it, sometimes it won't. It can just be kind of frustrating. And, just the other day, actually, there was an image that I had taken. I was like, oh, cool. I kind of want to upload this to my Instagram story. And it was just such a hassle for no reason. Maybe they can make that an improvement in the future. I have no idea, Maybe there's something I'm doing wrong. I have no idea. I doubt it. But I just think that that app could use some improvement, as well as some of the connectivity or something. Um, but it works. You can get it to work. It can just be a little bit tricky. But overall, I love this camera. It is fantastic. I've only had it for about 2 months, so I've really barely scratched the surface of what I all know about it. But I'm definitely really starting to get the hang of it, so that's why I felt like making this video now. But I've loved some of the images that I've been able to make with it. And the fact that they've been straight out of camera, it's made it that much better. Sure, there are definitely some downsides to this camera, but if there was a perfect camera, I think that everyone would have it, depending on price point, of course. I'm very excited to continue shooting with this and mastering it. I'm hoping to eventually only shoot with the OVF and not even looking at my images until I get home, so that I'm not, just checking it and taking 4 or 5 shots of the exact same thing. Because that's how I want to treat this. I want to treat it and pretend like it's film, because I love the feeling of shooting film. And I think that this could potentially be the closest thing that you could get to that when it comes to digital. So I think most people are probably wondering, would I recommend this camera to anyone else? And my answer is going to be yes and no. It's of course going to depend on what you want or what you need. And if you're somebody like myself that prioritizes size, is comfortable shooting with one focal length, and potentially wants to do things straight out of camera, or just really likes Fujifilm, then yes, I would say that this is the best camera right now that money can buy for all of those different things. But if you're somebody that potentially wants to shoot more professional video, or somebody that wants to get more lenses and do those types of things, then no, I would not recommend this camera. I'd recommend something like the X-T3 or X-T4, or something with interchangeable lenses then. Maybe not even Fujifilm. There's so many different options. And like I said earlier, if there was a perfect camera for everyone, then, we would all have the exact same one. And there's not. There's no perfect camera. So you're just going to have to, think about what your priorities are, what you're wanting to learn, what you're wanting to achieve with what you're making, and make a choice accordingly. Next week, I will be releasing a video comparing the X100V to the X100S, so look forward to that. If you have any questions, go ahead and leave a comment down below. But with all that being said, go ahead and like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next Tuesday.